You remember Chuck E. Cheese, right? That place where every kid in America had at least one birthday party. The smell of cheap pizza, the sound of arcade games going off like slot machines, and that terrifying animatronic mouse on stage singing songs that would haunt your dreams for years. It was chaos. It was magic. It was childhood. But here's something you probably don't know. In 2020, Chuck E. Cheese filed for bankruptcy with over $1 billion in debt. Yeah, you heard that right. $1 billion. The place that used to pack in families 7 nights a week, the empire that dominated the family entertainment industry for decades, completely collapsed. So how does that happen? How does a company that basically printed money for 40 years end up drowning in debt? Well, buckle up, because this story is a lot darker and more complicated than you'd think. Let's go back to the beginning. 1977, a guy named Nolan Bushnell had just sold Atari to Warner Communications for $28 million. This is the same guy who basically invented the video game industry. Pong, that was him. But Bushnell wasn't the type to just retire and count his money. He had another idea, and it was weird. He wanted to create a place where families could eat pizza and play video games while being entertained by animatronic animals. Yeah, that was the pitch. Pizza, games, and robot animals. If you pitched that idea today, people would laugh you out of the room. But in 1977, it was genius. On May 17th of that year, the first Chuck E. Cheese Pizza Time Theater opened in San Jose, California. It had everything. Arcade games lining the walls, a stage with animatronic characters performing songs, and at the center of it all was Chuck E. Cheese himself, a rat from New Jersey who became a mouse and somehow became one of the most recognizable characters in America. The concept exploded overnight. Parents loved it because it kept their kids busy for hours. Kids loved it because it was sensory overload in the best way possible. You could play skee-ball, win tickets, trade them for prizes that were worth maybe 50 cents but felt like treasure. And the pizza? Look, it wasn't great, but it didn't matter. You weren't there for the pizza. You were there for the experience. By the early 80s, Chuck E. Cheese was everywhere. The company went public in 1981, and the stock shot up. Franchises opened across the country. At its peak, there were over 300 locations. Chuck E. Cheese wasn't just a business. It was a cultural phenomenon. It was the place to be. If you didn't have your birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese, did you even have a childhood? But here's the thing about rapid success. It attracts competition, and Chuck E. Cheese had serious competition. In 1980, a guy named Robert Brock opened the first ShowBiz pizza place in Kansas City. ShowBiz was basically a direct copy of Chuck E. Cheese, but with better funding and a different animatronic band called the Rock-afire Explosion. They had a gorilla, a bear, a dog, all performing on stage. And honestly, a lot of people thought ShowBiz was better. The pizza was better. The animatronics were more advanced. The whole experience felt more polished. This kicked off what you could call the Pizza Arcade Wars. Chuck E. Cheese and ShowBiz were locked in a battle for dominance, opening locations as fast as they could, trying to saturate every market before the other guy could get there. And for a while, it looked like both companies would survive. There was enough demand to go around. But then the economy tanked. 1984 hit, and the video game industry crashed. Atari, the company Bushnell had founded, basically collapsed. Arcades across America started closing. People weren't spending money on entertainment the way they used to. And Chuck E. Cheese, which had expanded too fast and taken on too much debt, was in serious trouble. In 1984, just 7 years after opening the first location, Chuck E. Cheese filed for bankruptcy for the first time. Yeah, the first time. Bushnell was out. The company was restructured, and in one of the wildest twists in business history, ShowBiz Pizza, their biggest competitor, bought them out in 1985. But here's where it gets weird. ShowBiz didn't kill the Chuck E. Cheese brand. Instead, they slowly started converting all the ShowBiz locations into Chuck E. Cheese restaurants. By 1992, every single ShowBiz was gone, replaced by Chuck E. Cheese. The Rock-afire Explosion animatronics were ripped out and replaced with Chucky and his band. It was a total rebrand, and it worked. Chuck E. Cheese was back. The 90s and early 2000s were good years, really good years. Chuck E. Cheese became the undisputed king of family entertainment. They modernized the games, updated the animatronics, kept the pizza cheap, and kept the kids coming. Revenue was strong. The brand was strong. Everything seemed fine. But behind the scenes, cracks were starting to form. In 1998, the company was bought by Apollo Global Management, a private equity firm. Now, if you know anything about private equity, you know where this is going. Apollo loaded Chuck E. Cheese up with debt. They borrowed hundreds of millions of dollars against the company and used that money to pay themselves dividends. It's a classic private equity move. Take a profitable company, bury it in debt, extract as much cash as possible, and hope the company can handle the weight. For a while, Chuck E. Cheese could handle it. Revenue was still coming in. Families were still showing up, but the debt kept piling up. Then came the real problem. The world changed. Kids stopped caring about arcade games. Why would you go to Chuck E. Cheese to play games when you had an Xbox at home, or a PlayStation, or a smartphone with 1,000 free games? The whole appeal of Chuck E. Cheese was built on the idea that arcade games were special, that you couldn't get that experience anywhere else. But by the 2000s, that wasn't true anymore. Kids had access to better games, better graphics, better everything, all from their couch. And it wasn't just the games. The food industry changed too. Fast casual restaurants like Chipotle and Panera started taking over. People wanted healthier options, fresher ingredients, transparency about where their food came from. Chuck E. Cheese was still serving the same frozen pizza they'd been making for 30 years. It wasn't cutting it anymore. And then there were the parents, the millennial parents who grew up going to Chuck E. Cheese and remembered it as loud, chaotic, kind of dirty, and yeah, a little creepy. Those animatronics that seemed fun in the 80s, by 2015, they were nightmare fuel. There were countless stories of kids being terrified of the characters, crying, refusing to go back. Chuck E. Cheese tried to rebrand. They redesigned the mascot to look less like a rat and more like a friendly mouse. They got rid of a lot of the older animatronics and replaced them with flat-screen displays. They started offering healthier menu options, better prizes, updated games. But it wasn't enough. The magic was gone. Then 2020 happened. COVID-19 shut down the world, and Chuck E. Cheese, a business that depended entirely on large groups of people gathering indoors to eat and play games, was obliterated. Every single location closed. Revenue dropped to almost zero overnight. And remember all that debt Apollo Global Management had loaded onto the company? Yeah, that was still there. Over $1 billion of it. With no money coming in and massive debt payments due, Chuck E. Cheese had no choice. On June 25th, 2020, they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. $1 billion in debt, 555 locations, thousands of employees, an American institution gone. Now, bankruptcy doesn't always mean the end. Chapter 11 is designed to give companies a chance to restructure and survive. And that's exactly what Chuck E. Cheese tried to do. They renegotiated their debts, closed underperforming locations, and eventually emerged from bankruptcy in December 2020. But the company that came out the other side was a shell of what it used to be. Fewer locations, less revenue, a brand that most people associated with the past, not the future. They've tried to adapt. They've added new games, experimented with delivery and takeout, even tested a virtual kitchen concept where they sold pizza under a different name through delivery apps. But none of it has been enough to recapture what they once were. So, what's the lesson here? How does a billion-dollar empire collapse? It's not just one thing. It's a combination of bad timing, bad decisions, and a failure to adapt. Chuck E. Cheese was built for a different era, an era when arcade games were the pinnacle of entertainment, when parents didn't have 1,000 options for kids' birthday parties, when nostalgia and novelty were enough to keep people coming back. But the world moved on, and Chuck E. Cheese didn't move with it. They stayed stuck in the past, banking on the idea that what worked in 1985 would work forever. And when private equity stepped in and loaded the company with debt, it took away any cushion they had to survive a downturn. By the time COVID hit, Chuck E. Cheese was already on life support. The pandemic just pulled the plug. And here's the thing that really stings. Chuck E. Cheese wasn't killed by a lack of demand. There are still kids who want to play games and eat pizza and celebrate birthdays. The problem was that Chuck E. Cheese stopped being the best option. Better competitors came along. Trampoline parks, escape rooms, laser tag arenas, indoor playgrounds with climbing walls and obstacle courses. These places offered what Chuck E. Cheese used to offer, a fun, unique experience you couldn't get at home. But they did it better, cleaner, more modern. Chuck E. Cheese became the place your parents took you, not the place you begged to go. There's something genuinely sad about watching a piece of your childhood disappear. For millions of people, Chuck E. Cheese wasn't just a restaurant, it was a memory. It was your 6th birthday party where you won that sticky hand toy. It was your first time playing whack-a-mole. It was the taste of that slightly greasy pizza and that watered-down soda from the fountain. It was the feeling of being a kid and thinking this place was the coolest thing in the world. And now, a lot of those locations are empty. The lights are off, the games are silent, the animatronics are gone. It's just another dead mall anchor, another relic of a time that isn't coming back. But maybe that's just how it goes. Empires rise and empires fall. Trends change. Generations move on. What was magic to one group of kids becomes outdated to the next. Chuck E. Cheese had its moment. For decades, it was the king. But nothing lasts forever, especially not in business. The companies that survive are the ones that evolve, that stay ahead of the curve, that don't get complacent. Chuck E. Cheese got complacent. They assumed the brand was strong enough to carry them through anything. They were wrong. And now they're a cautionary tale, a reminder that no matter how successful you are, no matter how iconic your brand is, if you stop innovating and start coasting, someone else will come along and take your place. That's just the way the game works. Chuck E. Cheese played, and they lost. And for a company that was all about games, that's probably the most fitting ending of all.